And then over to you, Veronica. Thank you.
Yes, thanks everyone for joining, and I'm very excited that Paul's come. It's been a long time. We saw Paul spoke at a DAMA chapter meeting. I think the Standard Bank in Rosebank was hosting it, and it was pre-COVID, so it's been a long time.
Yeah,
a lot of things have happened since then. But I really enjoyed his talk at that point, and it's interesting for everybody, but we're not all in records management. So it's even more interesting to find out what goes on with records management in that space. Every now and then, I have someone on my training who's a records manager, and I always think of Paul. Paul and I share something history-wise, is we both did geology at Rhodes in the early 80s. In fact, the last
you're giving
time
your age away, Veronica.
And yours. The last time I actually went, Paul, I visited the departments. My son was there, visited the department, and I found your honours project.
Oh, fantastic.
Still
there
there.
we go. Wow.
Yes. Other than that, we haven't professionally worked together. We just had that early studies passion for geology.
There you go.
Yeah, would you like to tell the people more about yourself then, Paul, please?
Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little bit of conflict. And when you said that occasionally you come across records managers, I'm not a records manager. So I'm really sort of an IT dude with a bit of business, and I've been in the sort of ECM world, the enterprise content management world, the unstructured side of, if I look at DMBOK, there's just a few paragraphs on the unstructured content. And I've been in that world for sort of 45 years. And as that world's evolved, going back to the early 2000s, I identified, or I came up with this concept called information governance, which didn't really exist. So I quickly, in 10 minutes, wrote what was then the first Wikipedia definition of information governance. And obviously now it's expanded and has become something totally different. And part of that, clearly the unstructured world still exists. More and more records management became a part of that. In the early days when I got involved, it was image management and document management, and the electronic side, records management wasn't there. And then obviously things like privacy, information security. And now I'm coming at it from a totally different perspective, and you'll see that coming through quite a lot today. And then the data side. So if you look at what my background is, my background's come from the unstructured side. Well, in fact, it started off in the pure data side of databases in my early IBM days, then veered into this unstructured world, and very quickly realized that there's a big disconnect between the structured world and the unstructured world. To the extent that I do a lot of ISO standards development in enterprise content management and records management, and was part of the team that wrote the standard on information governance. But as records managers, and I go back, you'll hear me a couple of times today say I'm not a records manager. The records managers don't understand data. They don't understand databases. They don't understand how to manage stuff sitting in SAP or Oracle or whatever your system might be. They know things that look like paper, and maybe those paper things look like an electronic document, even though if they were born digital, if they were signed digitally, it's still something that's a tangible, concrete artifact in its own right. It's not relying on a database to present it. And we are currently working on an ISO standard to manage data as a record. So with that starting point, I just want you to understand that I come at it from a totally different viewpoint, but in my heart of hearts, I'm an IT person, but I've been involved in this other space, and I'm gonna talk a few times today about differences in terminology. And I do have an invite somewhere in the presentation. I'm part of a drafting team for an organization which is doing work on e-discovery and bridging this gap between data or the IT world and the records world. And we're developing a crosswalk on the different terminologies. So even if we look at information governance and data governance, you think they're the same thing, but they're not. And when I talk to the information management professionals, not the IT professionals, and there's a whole profession out there called information management, and they're not you. They're librarians and they're archivists and they're scanning experts. They're not IT people. So right from the outset today, I want to just, with everything I say, recognize that there's this parallel universe out there if you're talking a different language to what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so with that in mind, can I share my screen? I do see there is William.
Yeah, Paul, one question, and it relates to the King 5 draft report or draft.
Yeah.
And I noticed that they're positioning data governance under information governance.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that? And what you've just said makes now a lot of sense to me, because it means that the King has the ear of the information governance world rather than the ear of the data governance world.
So I was very, very vociferous probably 20 years ago with this whole distinction between information governance and not even data governance. So between information governance and IT governance. So there's IT governance, there's data governance, there's so information governance, data governance, and IT governance.
Yeah.
And all of them are clearly interrelated, but they're not exactly the same thing.
That's right.
And I shared at the time quite a number of podiums with King where I was probably too arrogant, and they spoke about IT governance. And I kept on saying, you can't just talk about IT governance. You've got to talk about information governance. So in King 4, they started to talk about information and technology governance.
Yeah.
So I think the recognition there was there's a distinction between the information itself and the management of technology. So I think I saw it starting in King 4. And I think we're going to see, and I'm really, really glad you raise it, because it highlights exactly what we're talking about. There are different professionals, all of which have absolutely valid, resilient, robust disciplines. But it's that middle ground, it's that overlap that I think is an area of concern. And I will touch more on that as we go on. But yeah, thanks for that. Another interesting one, I spoke about privacy. And if you attended any presentations from the information regulator, especially in government, they emphasized heavily, you can't do privacy without proper records management. And it's absolutely right. You also can't do privacy without proper data governance and data management. So yeah, clearly an overlap. And when I go through today, do not for a second think that I'm saying records management is king. Absolutely not. It's a discipline. It's a recognized discipline. It's well established. There's professionals in there. It's an important discipline. And what I encourage from today's session is start to understand those differences, start to understand some of the terminology, start to understand the frameworks and the interlapping between those frameworks and something like DMBOK. Okay, and recognizing there are other frameworks that are out there too. So I'm going to use some foreign words. And every now and then when I use words, I'm going to use them in a foreign way. So let's start off. And here's pure definitions. And I put two sets of definitions. The first one is from the National Archives and Records Services Act of South Africa, the government body responsible for managing records in South African government. So all government bodies need to comply with the National Archives and Record Services South Africa Act. And then I talk about the ISO definitions, and you'll see they're very similar, but the private sector would look to ISO, government would look to the NASA definitions. So what is it? Records management, obviously, from creation, maintenance, use, disposal of records through a life cycle. I think we can all understand that, and for proper governance. If we look at the definition of record, I think that's key. They talk about, and as I'm saying these things, I want you to think of it in the light of the work that you all do, or the fields you're all in. So recorded information regardless of form or medium, and they would include in that obviously paper records, electronic records, scanned in images, photographs, videos, audiovisual, microfilm, but it stemmed from those things. I'm going to use a very loose thing of those things that looked like a paper thing, looked like a document. So if you think of a document that contains evidence of the activities of an organization, that thing is the trustable thing that you will go to be able to say definitively this person or this organization did this. That's where their definition of a record comes from. And already, if I think as a database specialist, I think, well, that's not how we treat a record. And a database record means something totally different. It's still recorded information. We could still arguably say, regardless of format or medium, but it's very different to what the records managers are thinking about. And it's for that, that's one of the key reasons why we've tried to write a standard managing data as a record, and it's been going now for about 6 years, and we're no closer to a standard. So my starting point, records managers don't understand data, and I'm going to say, at the risk of being shot, that IT governance people don't understand records in this definition. Don't shoot me just yet. If I then go to the ISO definitions, same thing, very similar. Field responsible for systematic governance of records with processes, controls, and systems. Information. So now we start to see, information, and then we could get into the debate, which is the superior term? Is information part of data? Is data part of information? And I remember having these debates with Howard at an organization we both worked at, where DM Bok saw data, not surprisingly, as the superior term. And in the first paragraph, it said data means information and data, and the term is used interchangeably. So are we talking information? Are we talking data? And I'm going to say, who cares? So what I encourage as professionals, if we've got it, it needs to be protected as an information or a data asset within the organization. Okay, regardless of whether we prefer to call it information or data, let's not get hung up in that argument, because we could spend weeks and no one's going to win. Okay, so it's those things you've got that you've got in the organization, whatever format, whatever it's in, whether it's in a database, whether it's a paper, whether it's electronic, whether it's audiovisual, whether it's a voice recording. If it is something that you have that needs to be managed in some way, let's treat that as an information asset or a data asset. 2 standards that we have here, and I'll just raise them. 15489, the Worldwide Records Management Standard. And then we've got a series of standards called 3300, and the Management System Standard is 3301. So there is a management system standard for records at the same level as 9001 or 27001 or 38500, any one of the standards that you might know. Francesca, did you want to raise a comment there?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I turned off my mic.
Okay, no problem. These 2 terms are quite interesting. And these came about, I think it was 2016, we were revising some of the standards. And we kept on talking about criteria for a trustworthy record. And we kept on saying it had to have authenticity, it had to be reliable, integrity, usability. And these terms might even sound familiar to you. And if we look at CIA in information security, at the end of the day, even King talks almost exactly the same terminology as this, even when they don't talk about it as a record. And I remember doing an analysis, and these words were used almost verbatim in the same way that we're using it here. So we came up with because it was too cumbersome to constantly say authenticity, integrity, reliability, usability, we came up with this term called authoritative. So something which possesses all of the characteristics of authenticity, reliability, integrity, usability is something that you can trust. So it was quite a nice phrase. And whether it's authoritative information, authoritative data, authoritative records, it's quite a nice concept to embrace. If any of you are 9001 quality management system specialists, in the old versions of 9001 and subsequently other management system standards, there was a strong distinction between controlled information or controlled documents and records. Both of them were referenced. And personally, I think it led to lots of confusion. So one of the questions we got asked the whole time, well, is it a document? Is it a record? Is it both? And we had that debate years and years and years and years. So we try to come up with a term that really applies to both of them. And if you think of this definition here, and once again, where we've got information, if you treat that as information and data, anything that needs to be controlled and managed by the organization, regardless of format or medium, once again, I'm trying to get away from these artificial definitions that force us into one or another direction, and to realize that at the end of the day, we're largely thinking about the same things. When I put together the first definition of information governance, that there were a couple of things that I thought were important. And the first thing was recognizing that there are a set number, and this is by no means comprehensive, of well-established disciplines. So you'll see IT governance, master data management, information risk, information security, all of those absolutely key, must happen, corporate governance. So there is no, I don't believe any one of those are superior to any of the others. They all have a right, they all have a role, they all have specialists, they all need to be implemented. So what we need to do is we need to recognize that and look for mechanisms to bring them all together in what I then is called integrated information governance. So IT governance, a part of a broader concept called data governance or information governance, whatever you want to call it, it must include all of these things. I borrowed these principles from a thing which eventually became IGBOK, the information governance body of knowledge. So if you've got DMBOK, you've also got IGBOK, and they spoke about these principles, which once again will be closely related to your world. You've probably got less emphasis on retention and disposition, which is a key thing that I will talk about today. And clearly the DMBOK principles are slightly different, but they're similar. You need people in place, you need strategies, policies, procedures, all of that, regardless of which of these you're doing, they all need to have those. And I think part of the problem we have is because each one of these specialists, each one of these specialist teams are developing their own standards, policies, metrics, disciplines in the organization, there's the potential for duplication. So you have a policy, you'll have an information governance policy or a privacy policy, which repeats stuff that's in the records management policy, which might repeat stuff in the risk policy. So what we were advocating here was trying to bring it all together because there's so much overlap, and where it is something specific to one discipline, highlight that, but let's not repeat everything unnecessarily. And then some key success factors, not going to harp on those. I think they're very similar to everything you do too. And then from the time information is created, repurposed to its ultimate disposition or disposal or deletion. Any comments on that? Does it talk in any way? William, I see your hands up again. I'm not sure if it dropped and came back up.
No, it came back up again. Master data management is, I understand why it's there. It's a buzzword. It's something that business speaks about. It's something top of mind when information is discussed. But is it possible to adjust this and just call it data management rather than just only one of our knowledge areas?
Yeah. And when I said this is not all inclusive, I've started work on a crosswalk which fed into the other crosswalk I was talking about just now. I started doing a PhD on this, which I never completed. And I very quickly realized that, so you've got data quality, you've got data management, you've got more, there's data science.
So data management encompasses all of the various disciplines: master data management, data quality, data security, etc., etc. So it might be better just to have data management as a catch-all, like you've got knowledge management, and
I'd be quite happy with that.
And that'd be helpful for us.
Yeah, and as I say, as I started to work through these, and there's a list of about 50 of these, I started to realize that, and again, some people call it master data management, other people call it data management. There are some groupings that do make sense, exactly what you've just said, without going into too granular a level and trying to put this at a very granular level. Putting it into clusters or disciplines makes more sense, and data management probably is a very good one. Okay, but I'll come back to that crosswalk just now, because I'm probably OCD when it comes to terminology, and exactly like you just said, things have a meaning. So we need to call things by the right name. But when you've got two disciplines calling the same thing by different names, it gets mighty complicating very quickly. So on the one hand, I'm an absolute purist when it comes to terminology. On the other hand, every now and then I say, whatever suits your environment, live with it. So you might have an environment who insists on master data management. Cool. And in another environment, it might be data management. And another one, they call it IT governance, or another one calls this data governance. Whatever works in your environment is what I've learned is the most practical way. So be pedantic, and where there are certain things which make sense, stick your foot in the ground. But there's times to just accept some things. Okay, so I'm not, on the one hand, I advocate things vigorously, and on the other, I also try and adopt a pragmatic approach. So whatever works.
100%. Is there some form of a 5 or 10 year roadmap that you have in mind to bring this all together? Because as you say, people can change, but they'll change slowly, right? Otherwise, they're going to diverge, right?
Yeah, agreed. So I had a 7-year roadmap, and I think I'm in year 8 now. And really, what that was my PhD, and so I started that 7 years ago to try and formalize that. And the reason I did that was because I had done all the work, and the academics out there said, put this into a formal structure that can be used by the industry. Yeah. And unfortunately, my focus is I'm out there. I've got a day job. I'm not an academic. And as soon as they started to talk about epistemology and or terms I still have no idea what they mean, then I lost it. Okay. But yeah, so it's an ongoing body of work.
No problem. Thank you.
Just related to that, purely for academic interest, and I think all of you will understand this. Obviously, everybody's studying AI at the moment, and AI didn't even appear when I started on that. And I've been doing a lot of studying on AI, and I attended a week's AI in-depth course in Dubai the other day, including learning Python, which is very different from COBOL and RPG and things that I might have learned 40 years ago. And I've never seen so many new terms in 1 week. And part of the problem there was, in order to fully understand AI, you've also got to understand maths, and you've also got to understand data science, which are disciplines in their own right. So yeah, I think it's complicated. We've got to try and simplify it as much as we can. This is a picture that I put together years ago, mostly because of the field I'm often working in, where you've got knowledge managers, yet another space, and you've got the records managers, and you've got business, and you've got IT. And I tried to position it in a way that might make sense as simply as possible. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it does position things that within knowledge management, you've got the tacit knowledge, and you've got the explicit knowledge, or the codified stuff and the uncodified stuff. And what I was trying to show with this picture is the majority of information we need to manage is here. It's in that's documented in some way, and I've included structured and unstructured. And as a knowledge management professional, you can't, I don't believe, get this right unless you've got some infrastructure in place to capture and store and protect and preserve and share that information. So focusing, my mouse is dying again. Focusing on this, which is what knowledge managers try and do, is meaningless without being able to put it in some systems. So I've just broken it loosely into information management and information governance, and I think that should and could also be data governance in your space. The structured world, stuff in databases, and unstructured. Because I've been in this world for so long, the typical industry wisdom, the rule of thumb bandied about in the industry, and I saw it again yesterday, in fact, is 80 to 90% of information is unstructured. Now, because you're a group of specialists who's probably spent a lot more time in this world, and Debbie and Veronica, and I'm glad Howard's not on this meeting. When I remember DMBOK 2, and I saw that this part of it was a very small part of the bigger DMBOK. Perfectly acceptable. There's many disciplines in there, but it didn't reflect the volume of information that sits here. And I'm not going to argue the percentages because I don't know the percentages. What I am going to state is, especially now, and I'm going to raise it from 2 points of view. From a privacy perspective or data protection, and from an AI point of view, the relationships and the links between these two are going to get more and more blurred. So if I think of AI and I think of a paper document, it's meaningless from an AI point of view. If we scan it and it's not OCR'd, it's meaningless. You know, if it's not indexed in some way, if you don't have access to that raw data, you can't use it in an AI world. If you extract it and you do OCR, it's still not the output from AI, but it's going to be used as input into your AI engines. So all of that input and managing the relationships between the unstructured document, from whence some, I don't know what percentage, some of that information that got fed into those AI engines came, which became data, which got repurposed and fed into output and reports and generative AI, I believe it's going to get harder and harder. And more and more, we have to look at that interrelationship between those two, especially in an AI world. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that just at this stage.
One of the use cases on some work that I've been doing recently was using AI to interrogate architectural diagrams. This is like, building houses and things like that. And it was pretty good at being able to identify, there's an issue here, this thing doesn't conform to that stuff. So some of the AI is not working so much as let me convert this to text to be used, but it's actually working in the graphical space as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
so that again is going to blur that thing.
100%. Even in that instance, if you look at an image or a technical drawing or a graph or a photograph, and you're still extracting that stuff, you're still extracting it from that document, whether it's a paper document or electronic drawing, and you're extracting that data and using it, the principle remains the same. But 100%, it's not just text. And this whole concept of now extracting information from graphs, visual AI, and doing things with it, again, going to become that link is going to become blurred. I then created this, and it's an artificial boundary here between those things which may become records, those things which may not become records. And here we could look at things that are versions of a document. So you might have many versions of something, and only the final one, the final signed one, for example, might become the record. But we still have to handle all of that other stuff. And those are all still duplicates. They're still scattered. Here you see I've just put version control in these little circles at the bottom here. So you've got all these things which are sitting in the organization. And what I am saying is, if we look at, let me use the term data governance. If we look at data governance, you've got to include everything in here. That's the reality, including this records management space, which includes records management policies, retention schedules, records management procedures, file plans. In government, they talk about a schedule of records other than correspondence. They're all classification schemes for information. So that's the record space that we're gonna talk more about. So here's a framework which talks to the things that need to be in place from a records management point of view. And you'll see some of them are going to look really familiar. On the left and right, we can have what we call key success factors, pillars for success. Management commitment, nothing new there. Proper policies, procedures, controls, nothing new there. Change management, absolutely essential. Managing this as a program, and within that program, managing projects within the program, nothing new there. Then the top, we can say it has to fit into our legal, evidential, regulatory, business requirement world. So it's got to talk to the mandate and the strategic drivers of the organization. Must cater for all information on all media, regardless. And you'll notice that data doesn't appear here, and that's because that's the mindset from which records managers have always come. And the fact that there's a disconnect straight away. We're saying records on all media, and when I looked at the definition of records earlier, and I said it is recorded information, stuff in a database is recorded. So even the records managers amongst the professionals in some respects are confused. And then all types of records. So it's not just HR records or finance records, it's everything. Then we talk about classification. And later on I'm gonna highlight the fact that we in your world, you probably classify things or talk about classification differently. So here classification means file plan, a business classification scheme, which might be getting closer to your world. As I said, a schedule of records other than correspondence. Knowing what you've got and structuring it in such a way that you can search for it, find it, retrieve it, and do something with it. And you can allocate metadata and things like retention and permissions and access controls to it. You can allocate disposal authorities, which is really the permission to destroy. Or transfer. So there's another word that this team used differently to you, and that's an archive. So the principle is much the same. So an archive in government says, after 20 years, transfer it to the National Archives. That's not what you do in IT. But in IT, you would still say, when something is required less frequently, or it's old or whatever, we could move it to secondary storage. And whether that's just some slower disk or maybe the same speed of disk, but you might move it out of your day-to-day operations into what you call an archive. But bear in mind that that definition is different to what the records managers would call archives. You might have different locations, you might have different storage areas. Think of caching, think of data caches, think of distributed repositories or distributed servers. Then we have what I'm calling a decongestion, and it means two things. It either means transfer to the archive or destroy when its value is up. And it's something that not even the records managers like to do, although it is a fundamental part of their job. And I think it's the one area that's really difficult when we look at structured data, when we look at data and databases. And I'm thinking privacy here as a good example, where you might need to delete part of a data set but keep the rest of it. And I'm not sure that all of our systems, ERP systems or other systems like that, are geared to do that. But it's an important thing that we have to consider, again, especially in terms of privacy. And then we need systems to manage it, and there's all the above, including email. And email is a funny one. You need to manage email as a record, but it's not something that the records managers have traditionally been good at managing. We talk about a vital record, and a vital record is those records that if they were lost or stolen or broken, the organization can't operate, or they're too difficult to reconstruct. So it's just those things that require an extra level of vigilance or protection. Business continuity, disaster recovery, nothing new there. And now we have a long-term preservation issue. Thanks, Veronica. So we have a long-term preservation issue, which is recognizing that...
I'm unable to raise my hand.
I saw it.
But
5
can
minutes?
I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course. Oh, sorry. I thought you were telling me to stop.
No, not at all. When I teach that CDMP fundamentals course and we get to vital records, we struggle to actually find examples.
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples? Because as soon as I say disaster, everyone says, oh, backups.
Yeah,
But
it's
not the backups, it's something else.
Absolutely right. And the problem is, so if you look at my definition, it's those ones that you cannot operate without.
Yeah.
And like in a medical environment, it could be patient records, it could be student records. It could be, and again, it gets tough. And you're right when people battle to give you examples, because typically they'll say, well, all of our records are important. They're all vital,
Yes.
But they're not. There are some that you can recreate. There are some that you can get from other parties. So not all of them are that critical. And we do a very simple matrix, which is just a simple risk matrix where we look at the likelihood of something happening and the impact if it does happen. And we just start with those things which are number 9 and say, okay, manage those ones. So it's not scientific for a second. It's an interesting one because both within the ISO standards community and here within National Archives, they both say vital records are important. Yet we don't have an ISO standard for vital records. And National Archives have exactly 2 lines in the entire, all of their documentation, which talks about vital records. They say you've got to have it, but they don't tell you how to do it. So yeah, it's if it's misunderstood, I'm not surprised.
Thanks.
Long-term preservation is saying if you do have things which need to be kept for the long term, and if they're in Word or PDF or paper, whatever it might be, we need to take preservation actions. And very simply, William, I see you. I'll come to you in a sec. Very simply, there's 2 answers. There's many ways of doing it. The 2 simplest ones is convert your electronic documents to PDF-A. PDF-A stands for PDF for archive. It's designed as a preservation format. And within IT, conduct some form of industry scan every couple of years to see what are the emerging technologies, what technologies do we have, which are at risk, what formats have we got that are at risk, and put some plan in place to convert and migrate those over time. But it is a big part of records management for those records which need to be kept for long periods of time. William?
I haven't met a lot of record managers, but the one thing that I found in terms of it's hard to call it character traits, but is that they're very passionate about their records. Almost to the extent that, you know what, these are my children. And now you're saying that I've got to get rid of some of my children. And you know what, it's not the same for the data people. Data people say, okay, there's this data, it's relating to customer. We need to archive it, etc. It's a little bit more impersonal than once that data gets context. I don't know if that's just me being silly or if that's an observation that's quite true.
No, not at all. It's a very valid one. And I think without trying to get into the nuts and bolts of overcoming it, it's not their records. It's the organization's records. In the same way, it's the organization's data. Often the people that think like that is because it's tangible, it's real, it goes to them. So
Yes.
they actually have the storage room with the stuff in it, whereas it's not as visible in the data world. You know, you've got a system and you've got a screen, and somewhere in the background there you've got servers and storage and whatever. I think it's maybe not as tangible. This is something that they can grab and hold and touch and feel.
Interesting.
And I think it also does talk to the people who gravitate to the profession. And I proudly say I'm not one of those. I'm not a records manager. They are by nature those sort of people. It's like a librarian. They like to sit in the background and they like to hoard the stuff. So yeah, it's actually a very valid observation. Okay, so just in the interest of time, what I tried to do with this is to highlight that we shouldn't distinguish between these. And what I'm saying here is you cannot have trustworthy, reliable archives if you don't have trustworthy, reliable records that go into those archives. You can't have trustworthy records if the things which generated them, the versions of the documents that got signed, weren't trustworthy in the first place. And you can't trust that you've got all of the records if your business processes don't produce all of those records. So I strongly encourage records managers, they should be focusing here, but the reality is National Archives focus here, and the people you were talking about just now focus here. And it's the wrong place. Nobody focuses over here, so all they do is they manage the stuff that they get given. And that's flawed from day one. Okay, so
that's an interesting distinction, because on our side, our data only gets context once we go back to the business process. So from a data management perspective, the metadata, etc., it's very, very embedded in the way we work, that we have to look for that from the process.
And it's no different whatsoever in the records world. But the problem is that this all happens in the business, and at some stage, depending on whether they want to or not, it gets to the records team. So there's a clear disconnect here, and it shouldn't be. In the electronic world, as the things happen, so that metadata should be generated, so the records should be generated, it all should happen here, exactly like you've just described.
Okay, that's good. Interesting.
Okay, I won't spend time on this. All I'm saying is we need to go back to understanding, what information comes in, who creates it, when does it get created, how does it get created, what should it be created, what system should it be created in, what metadata should be captured about it then. At some stage, whether it's done automatically or manually, it gets declared to be a record. And at some stage, it should get into a formal repository and then either archived or destroyed. And it's just, once again, quite a nice distinction to ask us, how are these things being created? Where are they coming into the organization? Who's bringing them into the organization? What formats are they in? Are they converted into something else? Who's responsible to classify it? Who's responsible to classify it against a file plan or some other business classification scheme? I like to raise this. It's not purely a records discussion, but for me, it's so important from a privacy point of view. So we might get something coming in paper, and if we think of a paper form, all it is is a transport mechanism for the data on that form. That's all it is. It's just something that we use to allow us to get data that we can take from that paper and store it in some system. But the records managers will keep that. They want to keep the paper because they say that's the record. But then you've got the data that you've extracted and put into SAP or Oracle or Hogan or whatever it might be. You've still got the paper. You might be scanning it. And when you're scanning it, you're storing an image in there, plus some metadata. Plus you've got emails coming in with electronic documents. And when we look at Papier, it says we gather information for a purpose, we use it for that purpose, and when that purpose is finished, we must destroy it. You've now got to go and identify all of these artifacts and cohesively manage them, because you can't just destroy the one and say we've destroyed that personal information, because you haven't, if it's existing in all these different locations. So it's not purely records, but I think it's an important discussion. Okay. I know we're probably running out of time. Can I go for 5 more minutes, Veronica? So what I've started to talk about here is classification, and I'm going to just talk about some different words. So when a records manager talks about classifying, they're saying allocate a records class to it. It is an HR recruitment record. It is a invoice. And based on that, we would give it some retention period. So we classify it according to a file plan or a business classification scheme. If we were in information security, when we're classifying, we're talking about confidential, highly confidential, secret, public, whatever, private access, internal use only. Also important here, but I know when I get information security teams and I talk classification, this is what they think I mean. And the reality is it's both of those. We can also have risk classification. We can also have classification in terms of privacy. Jerry, can you give me another battery, please? This thing's dying. So just bear in mind that classification means different things to different people. And that's what I've spoken about a record, I've spoken about archives, so I won't repeat it. I just highlight this thing here, the International Council on Archives, the ICA, have an expert group that I'm part of, and what I've done is I've presented some of the findings that I found when I was comparing the definitions used in DMBOK and IGBOK and information security and all the different terminology to try and highlight those differences in terms to come up with something that we can all relate to. I'm not saying change your terms, and I'm not saying to the records managers change your terms. What I am saying is let's develop something that when you talk about this and somebody else is talking about it, here's what they mean, and here's what you mean. So that's this crosswalk that we're working on at the moment. And if anybody is interested, please get in touch with me, and I'd love to get your perspective on some of the different aspects of terminology. William, I'm not sure if your hand is still up there, and Busisiwe, I see you.
Yeah, Busi was first.
Yes, so you've moved from that point, but it was on the point of classification and how it is different from coming from the records management perspective, security. We can even add data there as well, risk and privacy.
Definitely.
But from a holistic management, right? And I'm asking this question because that's an exercise I'm currently doing now, is basically trying to find a way to how do we holistically classify data, irrespective of whether it is structured or unstructured. Because what ends up happening is I'm from data governance, and I've got a list of classifications that I have of information that basically comes from the document in some cases, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the DPO, the data protection officer, that is classifying it based from a document's record perspective, which might be different. But ultimately, when we get data subject requests or anything, the same data needs to be found across all of our systems. However, our underlying metadata is different. So my challenge is how do we converge and align that in a case of we are classifying the same data in the same way.
Yeah.
And so that our metadata aligns so that from a business process perspective, when it kicks off, it carries the same label across the different stages in which the travel.
Yeah, very important. In 2006, without me knowing what I was doing, I was working with one of the large banks, and I came up with this concept of I can't remember what I called it, but it was a master metadata system, a database. And what I've come to do more recently is I have what I call an extended file plan. And the reason I use that terminology is because very often working in government, we start with the file plan. So I'll start there, and I'm not going to show you file plans, but it's a very limited instrument. So we just use a spreadsheet, and what we then do is we take, it's like a spreadsheet on steroids where we put all of the potential classification areas. So is it PI, is it special PI? What are the permissions, access controls, what systems is it stored in? Is it sensitive, secret, top secret, whatever? And we put the risk rating. So we just use a simple thing where we have an inventory. So when I call a file plan on the left-hand side, we've got an inventory of all of the types of information. And then we've got these whole bunch of grouped classes. So if you want to get in touch with me afterwards, I'll share an example of it. I don't want to try and find it now, but so that's how we've done it. We literally use a spreadsheet and we say, what are the things we want to know about it from a risk point of view? What do we want to know about it from security, permissions, privacy, records, retention? And then we use that. It's really a business classification scheme, or we would call it a master file plan or an extended file plan in the government environment. William?
Oh, thank you.
So I was asked to come and resolve a problem of definition between the marketing department and the sales department of a company.
Yeah.
They both had churn, and the CEO wanted one churn number on his dashboard, right? And so I said, okay, well, can you give me the formula and definition for your different churns that you're arguing over? And of course, they're different because they're different creatures, right?
Yeah.
And so then they had the issue that there's only one field in the system to hold churn. Now, they were fighting over this. And I said, okay, look, guys, these are two different creatures. You need two different fields within your system. They said, yes, but the CEO is never going to go for it. I said, okay. I went to the CEO and I explained to him, and I used Porter's value chain. I said, do you understand that you've got your market, sell, serve, etc. Value chain? And he said, yes. I said, each one of them have a different churn. Each one has different formulas. Each one, don't you think you should know what's going on inside each box? And the lights went on for him.
Yeah.
And when I did that, I went back to the guys and I said, from today onwards, nobody uses the word churn. If you're talking sales churn, you use the word sales churn.
Exactly.
If you're doing marketing churn, so you prefix.
Yeah.
And that's the way we need to fix this. And people need to stop being lazy and shortening stuff and start calling things what they really are.
And I think we can also start with some form of data dictionary or glossary of terms, at least understand where those different things are used potentially to mean the same thing, or in conflicting ways. But let's start by understanding what we've got and how they're used to determine what the right terms are for the different things.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And I think if we prefix security classifications and privacy classification as terms, then it becomes easy to then go through all the different areas and say, well, what do you call a security classification? But then we're doing it at that level rather than the higher level, because to generalize it, we're going to get it wrong, right?
Agreed. And you can't. And when I started off today by saying each one of these are absolutely valid disciplines, that doesn't go away, and they've all got their terms. And sometimes when I spoke about semantics, sometimes those terms mean very specific things, and you can't just generalize.
No, you can't.
But let's standardize and generalize where we can, and let's recognize where there are real differences. And again, in the example and Veronica, I'm almost done. In the example I spoke about with Howard, we came up with, we agreed that sometimes let me throw away my professional arrogance, and sometimes let you throw away your professional arrogance, and let's agree something that can work. It might not be perfect, but let's come up with something that's pragmatic and practical. And if I think it's a 1.5 and you think it's a 1.6, but it doesn't really matter, let's just agree one of them and live with it.
You know, AI is getting this right. And the funniest thing about it is that people are not even picking up on it, right? You, I, somebody else can go and key in the same phrase looking for the same stuff. We're actually going to get different answers.
So right,
but you know what? It's going to be happy space for each one of us, right?
Yeah. It's a really good analogy. Okay, so I think I'm going to end here. Those are, I think, nothing different there. So I'm going to end, and I'm going to say, final questions, comments, thoughts. Let's try and bring this over so you can actually look at me, or I can look at you. Yeah, any questions, comments, thoughts to end?
Just from me, we'll see here again. So this is a very important and sometimes neglected topic within organizations until regulation comes and something needs to be done about it. But I think just William, I have a slightly different take to you, to say that instead of like trying to over specialize everything, rather than how can we make it work for the organization, so we get so bogged down into our own specialities that we miss the point. At the end of the day, organizations are there to meet an objective, right? And what is the best way in which we can bring together all the different perspectives to meet the business outcome? I'm in business, so ultimately it's about that. So
you're 100% right, Busi.
Yes.
The challenge is we have to take what you believe and know in business, which is 100% true, exactly what Paul says. And obviously people do not go and speak in detailed specifics, right? Because they're just not used to that sort of thing. But we have to take that and we have to get it down to the lowest data format. And we've got to keep that consistent through all the data lineage, the transfers, everywhere through, to come up on the reports in the right place, to be aggregated only when necessary in the right thing. There's a lot of calculation work. So we absolutely need to have the specifics. So somebody has to do that linking, right?
Yes, I agree. Where it is required for things to be separated and segregated because they are different, yes. But where it does not need to be different and they just requires an alignment, then let's have that alignment.
I agree.
Because we end up having 500 of the same. And I say this because it's part of some of the stuff that are frustrating, is that that can't be basically the same if the business aligns or the organization aligns.
And now you've said the exact word. The challenge doesn't really lie so much with the data. It aligns, or it goes back to how the organization and its cultures, multiple, if you merge in acquisitions, you bring in new cultures, you bring in new speak, you bring in new data, definitions, etc. It is how you get that to come back to the common denominator that's the challenge.
Yes.
And maybe it's a good sort of rounding off statement. At the end of the day, we're doing it for the business. So we start off with what are the business objectives, what are the drivers, what are the mandates. That's where we start. And then we say, well, how do these things fit into that, and how do we support the business in achieving the goal of the business?
That's right. We all agree to we all agree to agree, and sometimes to disagree, but we'll agree anyway.
There we go. We can agree in different terms.
Does anyone
Yes.
got
True.
anything else to add?
Okay, any more questions? I did put my contact details up there a moment ago.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to have more questions when we think a bit more about this.
Yeah,
Definitely would like to get hold of you again.
and I'm very
So
happy to be
Paul,
contacted anytime. Yeah, William.
Thank
just
you.
from our side, would be helpful when you do a presentation, if you can change that master data management to data management, it'll be helpful to bring us into the fold.
Yeah, you see the semantics. That's exactly what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
These
yeah.
bloody
Accepting
data people.
thing, right? That's the challenge. It's actually leveling. It's not so
Yeah.
much semantics.
Yeah, quite right.
Cool. Thanks. It's
Okay.
been very informative.
Yes,
Good.
thank
I
you
hope
so
interesting.
much.
And I not
Very
most of you aren't
interesting.
records managers, so I hope it touched a spot.
Yeah, help
I
me
actually
with
haven't
my.
found it. Carry on, Bussy.
Sorry, it was me.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh, no, I just say that I actually haven't found a records manager I don't like. So there you go.
Oh, good.
Nice. Sure helped me with having to teach this in my data management fundamentals. Thank you, Paul.
Pleasure. And yeah, thanks very much to Veronica and to Dharma. And thanks everybody for being here.